welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Who are you?
Okay, I'm Benjamin. Do you want like an introduction, like?
Yeah, we did like a short plan on what to talk about because our history goes like way back.
Yeah.
So yeah, a brief introduction about you, and then we can jump into kind of our story.
Yeah, sure. So from the UK originally, moved to Sweden 2009. So my entire working career has been in Sweden. So in Sweden, I got into coffee. Started working at Drop Coffee after a few different cafes, and then after that moved on to Jon Nyström and then Lycke. So I've been roasting in a few different roasteries here in Sweden. Mostly it's production roaster, but I've always been like that coffee guy, like the guy in each company who's like the coffee nerd. If you want to know something about coffee, talk to him. He'll have the answer. That's the person I've been.
Yeah, because you came in at Drop Coffee 2011, 10?
Yeah,
11?
probably 11. So you've been around 2 years or so before.
You were fresh in Stockholm.
Yeah.
You didn't know
barely
much
spoke
Swedish. Yeah. And you just got thrown in. And yeah, back then and now, you always have this like the extra interest, you always take it another notch.
Yeah, I think that's something. Like, I'm a very curious person. I always want to know more. I'm never like, as soon as I learn something, I want to find out more about that topic. So it's the same with anything. So now, like where I'm working now, I've been taking interest in sake, for example. Like as soon as I open my eyes to something, it's like, okay, there's this whole other world you're not aware of. Then I want to get more and more into that world and learn more about it.
And information stucks on you. Like you remember
much,
stuff. Yeah. I have friends in the wine industry. We're gonna go into that later, but they also just remember stuff. I think it's the same for me with coffee, or like in some cases marketing or e-commerce or whatever. Like things that you're interested in sticks.
Yeah,
and that's amazing. So for me, it was my first experience of you was latte art.
Yeah. So I was one of those guys that when you get into coffee and start becoming a nerd, before you really get an idea, latte art's usually the first thing you get stuck into because the information in coffee's not typically been available. So before you get into extraction technique and brewing, or before you get into roasting and then finally like the production side of things, latte art's the first thing to grab hold onto. So I think most people who end up becoming good baristas or roasters, at one point they were probably interested in latte art because they're the person who wants to take their craft as far as they can. So me and Jelle, who used to work at Drop as well, we were like...
He was here last week.
He was? Yeah. So we were both really into latte art, and then both of us then have moved on to becoming more interesting, competing as baristas, and then roasting, and then those part of things as well. I think it's like... just latte art's the first thing you grab hold on to, and then as soon as you can get more information, you start like trying to get more and more and really get deeper down the rabbit hole. Yeah.
And you had your first latte art experience in UK, right? Because you knew stuff when you came to Stockholm.
No, I knew nothing.
You knew nothing?
No, my first coffee job was in Sweden actually.
Ah, okay.
Straight from school to Sweden.
Ah, okay, cool. And we back then I remember we talking about this, like where to go next. Like the pedestal of someone being the coffee roaster, like the god kind of thing, the end goal of coffee. But you really taken it like the full route. Yeah. Like many of us have done since working in the industry for 15 years. You've done a little bit of everything, and then.
But as working as a coffee roaster, you get kind of like bitter towards the rest of the coffee industry. So like for me, working as a roaster, when all of the baristas are coming, it's like, oh, I want to learn to roast. I'm like, I want to roast. It's like, do you really? Like most people I find don't really understand what the roasting is. There's a romantic picture of it, like how you think it is. It's just cupping all day and that's it. But production roasting is actually something very different. It's like...
it's like an industry work. Yeah, it's like...
it's industrial. It's working in a factory, heavy lifting, opening coffee bags, repetitive, like again and again, standing by a roaster all day. Not everyone's cut out for that. You know, it's a very physical job. And I've worked with a lot of baristas who then come to the roaster and it's like, oh, this is hard work. Like, yeah, it is.
Especially when you grew kind of going from Drop to Jon Nyström.
Yeah.
And for the first time, I was there as well. I don't know who started first. I don't really remember, but
I was there 16 to 19.
yeah,
You
I
were
think
there
I
first.
started
Yeah.
15 or something. But I was in the shop in the beginning. So, getting like the volumes,
Yeah,
like
that was crazy.
like hundreds of tons of coffee. That's another story. Like being like we are doing now on the 7 kilo. It's like, of course, we can get some volumes out, but it's if you have a 360 kilo probat,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, we're doing 300 kilo batches of some micro lots as well, which was insane. They were so when I started working at Johan Nyström there, they just built the new factory in Lena outside of Sweden and installed a 360 kilo probat, and no one had used that roaster before. So I was coming from roasting on a 25 kilo Diedrich, fully manual with cropster and everything at a specialty coffee roastery, going to another specialty coffee roastery but like more industrial in style, roasting. I think it was 1,500 tons a year, and it was huge volumes. So I was sat there by this huge machine at a little desk with a laptop trying to figure out how this roaster worked with a probat technician next to me.
But the reason you were there, that you were an excellent roaster. You knew a lot, like how to taste it, and because that's what you need. You need to roast it, try it, and then go back to the drawing board again.
But I noticed that with the probat technicians as well, they weren't used to my way of thinking about roasting, and everything was like, can we do this on this roaster? How can we do this? And we could actually get very good profiles on that machine. It was very good. It's probats. I've been saying a lot to people from Probat that they should make a shop roaster that's the same kind of system, because it had a external burner just like a Loring, and then it had a separate afterburner, so you could more. The Loring, you have the single burner, that's the afterburner, and the main burner, so the burner can't go as low because you have to always have that function as the afterburner. But on that Probat Neptune, since they were separate, I mean, it's not as energy efficient, but since they're separate, you had more control over the burner, and it was air recirculation. So you could get really good profiles. But the only limiting factor was the size of the bean probe, which is like 14 centimeters or something. So we used to like half like a millimeter or whatever it is on the Loring. It's like a huge difference. Things are very slow, and you had to think a lot in advance and try and like read between the lines what's actually happening. So you knew if there was like a tiniest like inkling of a crash, it was a huge crash. It's just that you couldn't see it because the probe was so thick, so you couldn't see what was happening properly. But you learn to work around those things, and you could roast amazing coffee on there. I actually had a roaster from the US who came for a visit, and he was looking at the machine. It's like, this is like an amazing machine. And he was really impressed that we could roast such good single origin coffees as we did on that machine, actually.
Yeah, because if you nail the profiles, like that share volume must be something, like if you get it right, you really get a lot of coffee right. And but
why
of course
do 110 kilo batches when you could do 4 larger batches? Is more consistency. It's more like if you're doing a batch brew at a cafe, or if you do like 1,000 aeropresses, there's going to be more consistency in a batch brew than there are in 1,000 aeropresses.
I think consistency is everything within coffee. Like that's what we talked about with grinders, like how can we get it more consistent, how can we get the brewing more consistent, and roasting, and even down to packing and stuff, like consistency to get the flow in everything and not do things too much and overdo stuff. So you've been on the 25 kilo, you then had a 25 kilo Diedrich, 75 kilo Loring at Johan Nyström,
12 kilo Probat, 300 kilo Probat,
back to a 35
Loring, a few of a Diedrich. So I've been roasting on quite a lot of different machines, actually, and I find that the Loring is the best for me, but just because it's so simplified. Like the Diedrich was very good, but you could adjust too many different variables. It was a lot like the old pressure profiling you used to do when the La Marzocco Strade EP/LP came out, and you had these baristas doing pressure profiling. So it's like, okay, I start on 2 bar, and then I go up to 7, and then down to 3, and then back up to 5. And it's like, you don't know what you're controlling. Just now we've realized, get your prep right, get your recipe right, grind well, and you can get an amazing espresso. You don't need to play around too much. And that's kind of what we were doing with the Diedrich. We were adjusting airflow like up and down, and like trying to be like, what happens if we do this and this? But what we were doing was changing way too many variables, so we had no idea what we were actually changing. And with the Loring, I mean, you're working pretty much just with the charge temperature, the end temperature, and then the gas. Everything else is consistent. No airflow, drum speed. So it makes things, I think it's easier to roast great coffee on a Loring just because you have all those variables controlled for you. Whereas on a Probat or a Diedrich, you have to also think about the conduction, convection, energy balance, you don't scorch and all that stuff. And that brings in another factor. So you can't be as flexible with your roast profiles.
Yeah.
So for me, the Loring is, at the minute, the most best, easiest machine to work with.
It's going to be interesting to see if there's more like high-end roaster, because there's a bunch of small roasters now.
There's more coming. There's one that's built in like the Czech Republic.
Is it? Okay,
yeah,
cool.
I don't remember. But
the technology is out there, so it should probably, because we see more and more using the strongholds. Have you used the stronghold yet?
No, actually, that's one of the few machines I've not roasted on yet.
Alexander's starting like, I think we should get one now.
Yeah, Loring and a stronghold. Yeah.
Do you want some water?
Okay, yeah.
Veronica, kan vi få 2 glas vatten? Lite vatten. Tack. Cool. And so we went from Drop to Johan Nyström.
Yep.
And then you were part of the Lykke project.
Yeah.
Roasting and
still part of it, but not roasting anymore.
Yeah.
Still a part owner of the company.
Yep. That's
Lykke was like isn't a great project that was started in the beginning of 2020, but it was right in the beginning of the pandemic. So my first year, we had no roaster of our own, and we were roasting at other roasteries and trying to like get coffee where we could and like try and figure it out. But when the throughout the pandemic, slowly we got like more and more stable, had our own roasting machine and working with a few specific origins, which is interesting as a roaster, because previously I was used to working with this like broad spectrum of like, we can get coffee from anywhere in the world, whatever tastes the best, that's what we're going to buy, that's what we're going to have. Whereas working as Lykke, we had our own projects in a few different origin countries. So to begin with, I was only working with coffee from Brazil, Peru, and El Salvador. And then since then, we've added Uganda as well. But you get really into a few specific origins, and not just like the whole of El Salvador, one specific, only Chalatenango in El Salvador, just this one specific region we work with. So the variety you have is producer, variety to variety, but everything's still within the same box, pretty much.
Still, and back to consistency again, like with small changes, which is super interesting. And how's the stuff coming out from like countries that on the like the high-end coffee scene you don't see it that much, like Uganda, Rwanda, and those places?
Yeah, getting better and better. I mean, even Ecuador, like the last couple of years, I've seen a lot of great Ecuadorian coffees
because they have altitude, right?
Yeah, exactly. Altitude, Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia. Bolivia, we had quite a lot of drop coffee back in the day when I was working there. And I found that Bolivian coffees from that exporter at least had a specific taste profile. But what's a little harder for me with Peru or Uganda, I feel like the quality is still so sporadic, so you don't really have quite a grip on what the taste profile is. So if I was pushed, what's Ugandan coffee taste like? It's hard to answer that question. Whereas if for Kenya, Ethiopia, you can make generalizations about Kenyan coffee. Oh yeah, generally they're like rhubarb, blackcurrant, these kind of taste profile. But for me, Uganda's still a bit like, I'm not quite sure what the taste profile is until we get like more of a standardization in the processing, in the drying, consistency. Exactly.
And that is something to look forward to, because you can grow good coffee everywhere, or amazing coffee,
and that's, get back to consistency, that's one of the main issues we have with coffee. We have a lot of people like want to talk about the terroir of coffee, where it's grown, like, oh, this coffee really tastes of the terroir. And we're like, does it? Do we know that? Because the biggest difference from coffee to coffee now is the quality of the processing, the quality of the drying. You could have two producers within the same region who are neighbors, who produce vastly different qualities, vastly different cup profiles. Until we can have some kind of standardization there in the way that drying is done, the way processing is done, and we have more similarities from producer to producer, then we can start talking about terroir and, from this side of the slope you get more of this profile, from the other side you get this profile. At the minute, that's not really possible in coffee because that consistency is lacking.
Yeah. You touched terroir. Now talking about consistency within coffee, and it's hard to like just talk about terroir when the consistency is not there. When you say terroir, I think about wine. Yeah. When did your wine interest start?
It started actually like 10 years ago. Thank you. like I don't remember what year it was actually, but there was one year I went to Mad Symposium in Copenhagen, which is like a food festival for chefs and sommeliers, and really focusing on like sustainability in food and what the future of food production was. And it's like it was a big thing every year that's unfortunately not going on anymore, but the organization's still there. And a few roasters were invited to brew coffee. This was just after Noma, Mads Kleppe, who was a head sommelier. Noma started taking coffee from Tim Vendelbo, and they really revitalized their coffee like project, how they were working with coffee in Noma. And that was a big thing for specialty coffee back then. Like this world's best restaurant is now using specialty coffee. And so they invited Drop Coffee, Copy, Tim Vendelbo, and Coffee Collective to stand there during the event and to brew coffee for all these chefs. So I had like the amazing opportunity to brew an espresso for Massimo Bottura, like an Ethiopian washed espresso for this legendary Italian chef, which is an incredible experience. But then hanging out there with all these sommeliers and like wine people and going to wine bars, that's when I like my eyes really opened for natural wine and got like into wine through that way. But I never really dared take the step to learn about it because the wine world felt so exclusive, you know? Like it was like there's so much knowledge, there's so much history there. Like where do you start if you try and get interested in it? So it wasn't until during the pandemic when I decided like, okay, I need to change something. I need to do something to keep developing personally and learn more. So I decided to take a sommelier education, learn about wine, and that kind of like opened my eyes to, wow, you can really go deep down the rabbit hole when you start looking at this stuff. I thought like,
and that's what I'm scared of.
Yeah,
like 'cause with a growing family and running this business, I still have my sports. I like to do some gaming when I have like 30 minutes over. I don't know, whenever. But to go down the wine route, I think it will be one thing too much. I also have fishing. I love fishing. Like, and people ask.
You can drink wine and fish.
Yeah, I know. I drink wine. It's no problem. But the problem is like I know I have the geekiness for it, and I have the interest of, and I'm a pretty good taster and stuff like that. But I don't think I have the time actually. It's for me it's better maybe to make another newsletter or something like that.
But that's the thing, like with coffee, when you get to where I am with coffee and you've been working with 10, 15 years and you've been roasting and working like with purchasing and all this stuff, to try and find more knowledge about coffee and keep developing is hard. There aren't that many people you can turn to who are like, oh, you teach me more. I want to know more about this. And you can get that information. Whereas with wine, it's like, okay, I start learning about Burgundy. Okay, now I'm going to start learning about the separate regions of Burgundy and then the different vineyards and then the producers and the vintages. And it's just never ending. And you can taste like a flight of many different wines from the same plot, from different neighboring plots.
But you also need the brain for it. Like the storage capacity. Because that's what I feel. I can go to wine tasting. I have friends who are interested. I get some wines from them and I can try stuff. And I can relate to it and I listen, but it doesn't really stick. Yeah, that's my problem. Like, so I've been to like one wine trip to Piemonte, and like a typical Swedish dude, I tend to like them, and that was like 10 years ago, and I still drink my Barolo and I love them, and I feel like maybe it's a little bit like.
But now in Barolo you can go down to different vineyard sites.
I know, but for me it's just like. That's enough. Yeah. I had a beautiful glass of 2017 this weekend with a creamy carbonara for my kids, and it was perfect. That's enough. But I have a 2016 a few bottles laying around in the basement, and that's enough. I know. I've learned it's a good year, and I've also learned that 17 is not the best year, but that glass was amazing, and that's enough. Yeah. So I sometimes call Jesper my wine person, and he just sends me some links and say, please store them if you have the possibility. And that's another problem. Yeah. I don't really have the interest or economy or space to store wine. No. So we don't drink much wine, but if if I buy a few bottles, then we usually end up drinking them within a year. So, but maybe one day.
Yeah, you need to buy more than you drink.
That's the thing. And if you only do it once and you don't start to drink more, then you just have like a few years of not drinking them, and then you're into the
exactly. That's what you have to get. But like learning about wine like that, like I don't have that kind of brain where I like memorize lists of producers. Like I don't know by heart like every single Bordeaux chateau that's in the 1855 classification. I don't remember like all the third gross, all the fourth gross. Like there's a lot of information, and there are people that know all that. I mean, maybe one day. What I'm better at is I have like a memory for taste, like what I taste. So I have like every time I drink a wine or a coffee, I kind of like cop and I kind of like store it somewhere in my brain. And the next time I taste something, it's like, oh yeah, that reminds me of that wine I drank that time a few years ago at that place. And like I have a memory for flavor like that I kind of, that's what I think is very useful working with wine as well.
Yeah. Did you have memory for what customers' names were and what they drank?
No.
Because
I was always terrible at that.
I had that.
I need to work on that.
That was interesting because and that's like the best customer experience ever.
Yeah.
Someone coming in for the second time in a bar, and the barista is like, cappuccino or whatever, same as last time.
Yeah.
Usually always take cappuccino, so you can always like cappuccino. They're like, oh my god, how did you remember?
Oh yeah, everyone took a cappuccino.
But that is and then connect names and stuff. But so now you're not into coffee that much. You're into coffee.
I'm into coffee.
But you have you work with wine.
Yes, I started a new job a few months ago working at a restaurant here in Stockholm where I'm a sommelier, so I'm in charge of like purchasing wine, the wine pairings, that kind of stuff. A restaurant with a tasting menu with ambitions to get Michelin stars, like that kind of
It's
level.
not an average restaurant.
No, so it's like first time working in the restaurant industry, getting a job at that kind of restaurant. That's pretty impressed with myself actually.
Yeah.
But I think like with the skill set from coffee translates very well. I think like even a part of me was thinking like maybe I should have done this 10 years ago. Should have started working in restaurants, started trying to work with wine 10 years ago. Where would I be then? But I think without the experience I have from working at roasteries, working with coffee and working with flavor, like how many people cup 40 different coffees from Brazil next to each other with small differences from the same farm and get into detail with differences from tasting one to the next. It's not that many people really. So then when you go to wine and you have that experience with comparative tasting in that way, it makes it a lot easier to work with. And so I think actually working with coffee for all these years has really given me a head start in the wine industry.
Working with taste.
Yeah, exactly.
What you've
it's
done.
a skill set that translates.
So tell us a little bit more about Persona.
So Persona restaurant here in Stockholm, owned by Louis and Jonathan, who have both worked at 3 Michelin-starred Francine previously. Started their own project a year ago, and now very French style of cuisine, but working with Asian influences and like really trying to give a more laid-back style of service. So everything's about like personal experience. So we have a lot of returning customers. We have like personal like wine program for them. So we buying bottles that we know they like, that we recommend. We have a menu called Bespoke, where the meals are prepared from the wine. So the wine is in focus. You choose the wine in the wine cellar. We're like, okay, this is a vibrant red wine with high acidity. And then that information is then given to the chefs, and they translate that into the dish. So we prepare the dishes according to which wine has been chosen. And the idea there is that Louis has been to a lot of restaurants in France where you can take your own wine with you. And that's not something we can do in Sweden. We have very strict wine laws. But the idea that you can have a meal catered to a wine that you bring to the restaurant, that's the kind of idea we're going for within the limits of what we're able to do within Sweden. So it's like a different way of looking at wine and food pairings, when more of the wine in focus than just the food itself.
And take us through, not in super detail, but you sit down and what's the average? You take like 10 dishes or what's the...
It's seven dishes, with some snacks and a few different mini days afterwards, but it's like 7 main dishes. And then most people take the wine pairing, where 6 different wines that we pair with the dishes. And I think most people want to be taken care of. They want everything to be decided for them. When you sit down and everything's prepared, okay, this wine goes perfectly with this dish, you don't have to think. And that's actually a problem with the wine industry in general. Like if you go to a restaurant and you get the wine list, it's just a list, long name of producers and vintages. And if you...
And I'm like, Barolo.
Yes. But if you don't have the prior knowledge, how are you meant to know what wine to order, what's going to go with your food? You need to have a prior knowledge of regions, styles, producers, their different styles, vintages. I mean, it requires a lot of the customer to be able to choose from that list. So that's why we're working with a list where we categorize it after style rather than producer or region. So we have like whites that pack a punch, or light and vibrant wines, different styles of wine that you can choose from, like a different way of pairing it. And I think that's something that coffee realized very early. When you go to a cafe and you have a list of coffees, like filter coffees, you generally have a taste description. You have something telling you how that coffee's going to taste.
And also categorized in like we did at Johan Nyström. Like the numbers 1, 2, 3. It was like 1 was like clean and vibrant or something, 2 was sweet and round, and 3 were more like heavy Sumatra style.
Joanna's working at Drop Coffee. She has different styles. I think she calls them comfort and like adventurous, like different styles of coffee, and then each one's categorized then into different colors, like the style. If this is more of a red, it's like red berries and natural process. This is orange or yellow. It could be more tropical in style or vibrant, more higher acidity. And it gives the customer like an idea of how that coffee is going to taste.
I wonder if we should do something like that.
Yeah, because with specialty coffee, we realize there is that this is a young branch. Most people are used to their coffee just tasting like cigarette ash. And so we want to let them know how their coffee is going to taste before they order it, so they're not disappointed. Wine has this long history where you just assume people know how the wine is going to taste. You assume people have that knowledge, which is, you can't really do. There's a lot of people who are new to wine, new to coffee, that don't know, they're kind of lost.
And we've been with Persona since day one. Also been like an experimental journey for us and for them. We did have capsules for a while, like high-end capsules. Also do like filter coffee. Now we started talking about espresso. So how's your dream? How do you... Okay, so me and Jonathan, I think, had this discussion. Or was it with someone else? I don't know. Why is coffee always served in the end of a 7-dish wine pairing dinner? Because you're probably going home to sleep. And
or
I think
you're
that's
going out and partying afterwards and you need the energy.
But I think it comes down. There's like, what do you say, hönan och ägget? What's first?
Oh yeah, the chicken and the egg.
Because you were supposed to drink coffee in the end of the dinner by some reason, because probably you want like some extra energy. And if you take a restaurant menu, it goes from light to more heavy. Like you end with the meat.
Exactly.
And the red wine. And then you have like whiskey, cigar, and chocolate.
And coffee for a long time fit into that same category. Coffee was powerful. It was like a whiskey or a cigar.
I think maybe it became powerful due to that. Also, like more and more powerful. Like the spiral was going downwards. So I think you should like have the coffee for the starters.
That's a good idea, because I've been to a lot of restaurants that have a very good coffee program where they work closely with a roastery and they have very good coffee. So they hand brew a Chemex of a Kenyan coffee from a good roastery, and then you have it at the end of the meal. And it's kind of an anticlimax because the whole meal's building, like the wines are building, the food's building intensity, and then you get to the coffee and it falls flat. Because you've had something so powerful before that the Kenyan coffee then is tasteless in some way because it doesn't match the intensity of what you've had previously.
And the caffeine will kick in nicely for the next 1.5, 2 hours. So I think that would be a super cool thing.
Start with the coffee.
Start with the coffee. Why not? So I'll throw it out there. It's gonna be interesting to see where it ends, because I've been to your place, and whatever happens in the future, you don't have that much space.
No.
That's the problem. Like, and you want to do everything and get V60s out or espresso machines or whatever.
It's also different now that I'm on the inside of that. Like working with coffee, I was always disappointed. Like, why don't restaurants have better coffee? Why don't they like do hand brew by the table? Why don't they do espresso? And then working on the inside, you realize why.
Yeah.
Like everything is like perfectly timed. Everything has to happen at a certain point. And then you have someone from front of house that's going to go away and brew a Chemex for 10 minutes and just disappear. And then you end up in the shit on the floor. Or you maybe make 4 espressos. You serve maybe 25 people a night, and then 4 of those people want espresso. And there's no real economy in that.
No.
Like where do you pay for the espresso machine? Where do you pay for the coffee? So it is kind of like you do it as a service. Yeah. You want to have good coffee as a service for the guest, but there's no restaurants out there making money on coffee.
No.
Really,
because you need volumes.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's hard to like, even though you serve like the Sudan Rumé or some crazy coffees from 90 plus or Café Grancha, it's hard to take that kind of money, and you also need to prepare it perfectly.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
And then you need the space, you need the grinder, and you need everything. So I think it's an interesting journey, and see where we're going. I also have some other ideas about how kind of fix restaurant coffee. But that's for another podcast. And and you've been there for a couple of months now?
Officially for 2 months, but I've kind of like helping a little bit here and there, like with purchasing and like emailing suppliers.
And you're open Wednesday to Saturday?
Wednesday to Sunday. Saturday,
exactly. And then off. That's super. Everyone should check it out. We can link everything. Yeah. Are you in charge of the Instagram or?
No, I'm not in charge. That's Jonathan, but
always
maybe he'll give you the keys.
Always the owner.
I remember back when you were at Drop Coffee posting pictures of your turtle on the Instagram. That was the original.
That's where it peaked. I know it's and we're closing in on 10,000 followers, by the way. I wrote something on Instagram yesterday like, oh, who will be the lucky follower be? And then I saw the follower count like
went down
and then up and then went down again, because like, who will it be? So I think we need like a contest or something just to, or not just, but if you go 10K, are you getting the 10K thing, or is it 10,000? Like,
I think it says 10K, right?
That's cool.
And you kind of lose
then
track of
nothing happens for like 3 months, and then it's 11.
3 months, that's ambitious. 3 months, and then we'll be up 100,000.
I know, hopefully. Are you somewhere else? Like, do you have like a personal wine account or something like that?
No, I only have my main account on Instagram, which has become a wine account.
I became
recently,
one. So we should also link to that. Was it anything else we talking about?
I don't know. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about coffee competitions, but I don't know if we have time.
We should mention coffee competition, and I think you also mention roast styles over the years or something like that. Does it link to competitions?
Kind of, because you could think that like having an issue with World Coffee Roasting Championships. Like if you go and look at the profiles from the people who have placed well in those competitions, they look crazy. It's like no one who like decides to roast that way these days. But the issue with that competition is like the coffee's cupped the next day or the 2 days after. So it's a competition like when you have to change your roasting style so that the coffee will taste as good as possible the day after roast, which isn't really applicable to the real world. I mean,
but I think on Nordic, is it Nordic Roaster?
That was different, Nordic Roaster Forum.
Yeah, but now there's a competition.
Oh yeah,
like
the
a few
new
weeks.
one.
Yeah, and we are in it, and they are. There you're sending your coffee, like pre-order, so it rests, which is.
Because if you think like, how would I roast coffee so it tastes as good as possible tomorrow? You're gonna roast it very light. You're gonna have a very short development time, so you keep as many aromatic compounds as possible, and then you have more of the volatile aromas in the coffee when you cup it the next day. But then a week later, all those volatile aroma compounds are going to oxidize, disappear into the air, and the coffee's going to taste flat and boring. So it's
and it's also hard for people like it's nice if you can choose between a Dietrich and a Loring then as well.
Oh yeah, roasting on a machine you've never used before. So a weird format for competition. And then like barista competitions as well. It's also like a weird format. It's like an individual competition where an individual wins, but what we're scoring is the coffee of a producer somewhere else in the world. Like if you compare to sommelier competitions, it's more based on the individual knowledge of that person. Yeah. So for the Swedish competitions, at least, there's like a written test before you go to the finals, and
in the sommelier,
and practical test to see if you have like knowledge and skill set required to compete. And then when you get up on stage in the finals, you have no idea what's going to happen. So you're standing there, and there's like you're in a dining room with actors playing guests, and you go up to the first table and they say, "Oh, we want a Negroni Spagliato," and you have to go and make that. Or they say, "Oh, my friend here was in South Africa. Can you recommend us some South African wines for this menu that you've never seen?" And that's like 15 minutes when you're in the dining room. And then you have like questions thrown at you. You have like blind tasting where you taste 4 wines. You have to give a full organoleptic description of them and then say what they are, what vintage, name a possible producer, and it's like really based on the individual knowledge of that person. Now if that competition was to work like a coffee competition, then you would have someone who's for a lot of money go away and buy Chateau Latour in 1945, present it to some judges, give a description of it, and then that person would win because they have an amazingly tasting wine.
That's coffee competitions.
But that's not that person's knowledge. That's which sommelier has the most money. Yeah. Because they can buy the best wine, will win. And that's pretty much what we're doing with Baristica. Yeah. It's like, I believe that if you have the same coffee and the same resources, pretty much anyone could do. Now this maybe sounds a bit too out there. No. But like if you have I think any barista, there are so many talented baristas who could win the World Barista Championship if they had the same resources and the same coffee as those who are competing. But it's very excluding. If you don't have those resources, you can't get in there, you can't win, even if you have the greatest base of knowledge. So I think we kind of need like...
Yeah, because you see what wins today is not cheap coffees.
No, it's very extreme. And then the producer doesn't get the credit for winning, which is crazy. No. It should be like, "Oh, well done, Finca Debra, you won again. Here's your trophy." You know?
That's true. It's interesting, but it is what it is. And we are you judging?
I was judging last year. I'd like to do it again this year to see if I have time. It's weekends, working in a restaurant, that stuff.
It's that thing, right?
But hopefully I'll be able to judge again because I think it's like, especially in Sweden, we need to give back to that community, make sure we get more people competing, try and make it more accessible. Because for a long time now in Sweden, we've had very few people competing because it doesn't feel like people have the chance, really, like there's any reason to do it. But if we can build more of a community, make it more accessible, give people more support, then hopefully we can build the competitions again in Sweden.
Depends on where Patrick competes.
Yeah. If Patrick's competing in Sweden, there's no point competing. You will not win.
That's how it is. So your journey in competition started with Latte Art?
Yeah, Latte Art, and then
Brewers Cup, right?
Brewers Cup and Barista Cup. Yeah. I won Brewers Cup in Sweden, but I don't know if it was completely unbiased that year. But long story, that's another story. But and then I competed in the World Championships in Rimini in Brewers. Didn't go great, but what was nice there is I had like a lot of good feedback from the judges saying that this was a really good presentation. It was just that my coffee and me, how old was I? I wasn't that old. I wasn't like as...
You're still young.
Yeah. My service skills weren't there, we could say, pretty much. Like I was very like withdrawn and didn't really speak outwards towards the judges and my coffee wasn't as the greatest. But I think I had a nice idea, which is still like applicable today. I was comparing the rate of rise, like the curve of the drying profile with the quicker dry in the beginning, which then slows down to the rate of rise of the roasting, and then the rate of extraction in my immersion brewing, which I think was a nice comparison, and I think it's still applicable today. You're aiming for that same kind of rate of rise profile in all aspects of the coffee. It's not just the roasting. No,
that's cool. We competed against each other, I think, even though we were represented the same.
That year you won with 2 different coffees.
It was that year?
Yeah, I competed then as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
I like that presentation.
With the 2 coffees?
Yeah. Because it was built on like people screaming about doing naturals of gesches. And I like involving the judges in some kind of voting. And
But I liked about that too, though, was that was the first time I'd heard anyone be like, "Do we really need crema? Crema doesn't taste." Was that the same production? The same presentation?
Yeah. But that kind of disappeared because I removed the crema.
Yeah.
And
they were like, "This crema doesn't taste good. Taste it." And the judges were like, "No, that doesn't taste good." And they no points. No.
But then I remember, I don't know if it was Sonia, whoever was the head judge that year, and she was like, "Yeah, but why didn't you just choose the best coffee?"
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, come on."
That'd be boring.
That would be boring. So, are you competing again?
I don't know. I kind of like to one day, but I don't. It feels like I'm putting a lot on the line now. Like I'd like to compete in cup tasters.
Yeah.
Because I feel like cup tasters there's free coffees, and they're all two coffees, free cups. They're pretty similar, and you have to identify which one's different.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty low bar. Whereas like tasting what I was talking about, the sommelier competition, when you have a blind wine in front of you and you have to say what region, what grape variety, the vintage, and that feels harder. But then I'm going to say that, and then I'll get like 0 of 12, whatever it is, right, and then I'll look like an ass.
Yeah.
So
but you need to also train on the cupping.
Exactly.
But there's a lot of wine people going far in cupping competitions.
Yeah, there were a couple of guys that won here in Sweden, cupping competitions.
Which makes sense, because I think having both coffee and wine, or only wine, I think you have maybe a wider spectrum of differentiating like acidities, and you maybe think of the product that you try in a different way. Just I think a lot of baristas cupping are like, is this Brazil? Is this Panama?
Yeah.
Like, instead of, there was this guy winning the World Series by only looking at the cups, I think. He was one guy.
See they reflected differently.
See the
oil
reflections, and they changed to black cups, and it just presents how different you can think of it.
But they were working with wine as well, has changed how I think about coffee, drinking coffee as well. Like, because like blind tasting wine, you don't want to guess what the wine is. You want to describe it, then look at your description, and then say, what could this reasonably be? You don't want because if you say straight away, oh, this is a Chablis, then you're going to look for some things to, there's like a bias where you try and like give yourself like support. You try and like bekräfta, you confirm your own beliefs. Whereas if you don't try and guess what it is, try and describe it, and then you can look at that description and see where you are. But also how you think about like mouthfeel. In coffee, we say, oh, this is a creamy mouthfeel, or this is a juicy mouthfeel. With wine, I think more about structure. And I think about like the structure in the mouth. So is this like a linear acidity that you just feel like straight down the middle of your tongue? Or is it round or more out in the cheeks? Or is it like just at the big front of your mouth and then it disappears? Or like where it hits the palate is also a big part of what differentiates different regions or different grape varieties. This is like super linear and precise. It might be a Chassagne Montrachet. Or this is like broader. It could be a Merceau. Like those kind of things. And I think that's more applicable to coffee now. So I started thinking about coffee that way. I think less about like, what does this coffee taste like? It's like, how's it feel? You know? For me, like a good coffee can taste of anything. It could taste like a Snickers bar, but it has like an amazing balance, an amazing mouthfeel, and I'm going to really enjoy it. Or it can be super floral, like tons of raspberry, and like have a really harsh mouthfeel, and I'm not going to enjoy that coffee, even though it has a more intense characteristic. Like the mouthfeel or the feeling of the coffee like kind of ruins it for me.
Yeah, I think I can relate to that. I try coffee. I usually start by evaluating the acidity and the quality.
Yeah.
But I think you have a better way of putting words on it, especially with. I think I need to learn more about like where and why, like the tongue stuff you talk about, and I never thought of that as much.
When I first started hearing people talk that way, like first I had to like consciously think, okay, what's the shape of this wine in the mouth? Like but now it's like automatic. Now I'm thinking, oh, this is super precise, so linear. This is broader. I think like training yourself, like forcing yourself to think in that way kind of like changes your mindset and gets you like more into it like automatically.
And if you want to learn that within coffee, if you jump around between roasters,
Yeah.
that maybe gets hard. That's good with like a subscription. You can like try
Different
our
roasters.
or our profile of
Mm.
roasting different.
But that's
producers.
something as well, is like the differences between roasters are getting erased. When I started roasting, like everyone roasted in like completely different ways. Everyone was doing their own trial and error. Oh, I think it's best if you do this. I think it's best if you do this. Now, probably mostly due to Scott Rao and Rob Hughes and those kind of people actually writing stuff down and making available. There's now more of a consensus, like what's a good roast profile. Like previously, you could put up a roast profile on Instagram, and someone would be like, "What's that?" And you reply, "Oh, that's good for my roaster." Like you haven't cupped my coffee. You don't know like how my profiles are. Now you can. Like if someone puts up a roast profile on Instagram, you can actually critique it these days because we realized that a roast profile does actually say a lot. It's not really more about coffee, the roaster to roaster. That was more about personal preferences. And now personal preferences are being more and more aligned with each other. We're getting more consistent as an industry, and our palates are more aligned. And that's good because that means that more of the differences are coming from the producer. So I'm hoping like soon it's going to be like, okay, I love the coffees of Diego Bermudez. Like I love his coffees. Which roasters have his coffee? Oh, okay. Standout have that one. Manhattan have that one. So I'm going to go buy coffee from them. It'll be more about the producer in focus, less about the roaster. And that's not going to happen until we standardize roasting in some ways.
Yeah.
Like, and we're getting there. I mean, like most roasters are good these days. There are very few roasters that I'd stay away from.
Roasters and roasters.
Roasters and roasting machines as well. Yeah. So we're getting that consistency, which means that we're finally able to put this is like the producer empowerment era, pretty much. We went through first wave, second wave, third wave, getting towards single origin, away from blends, more about roasting lighter, Nordic style, and now we're in the. Now it's finally that stage with the producers being the ones selling their coffee.
But it's interesting when you buy a new roaster for like €1 million. It should.
It should work.
It should work. But why doesn't it come with like pre-built profiles?
Yeah.
Because I talked with the guys Loring about it when we started, because we were picking Alexander's brain and his history and knowledge, but also others who were kindly giving us like a few tips and you as well, like you can work on that there. But if you buy like these kind of super machines that have an optimization that is amazing, it would be quite nice. Like, what's your amount of coffee and what's your origin, what's your variety, or even like through a database.
We're going to get there soon with AI though, right?
Yeah, probably so. Get there. And then you can just get like, you maybe can't get all the way, but it would be nice because now you can be like 4 minutes, 12 minutes, like 250 degrees of charge or 50. Like you can do whatever, like, but it should be like, this is the preferred profile.
I started thinking I think there's some out there, there's a universal roast profile that works for every coffee. It won't be like what heat application you have, because that changes depending on the density, the moisture content, the size of the beans. But I believe there's a perfect probably rate of rise, or if there's some other thing we're not measuring yet that it could be, that is universal for all coffees. If you hit this, you've nailed that coffee, it's perfect. And that's because coffee roasting, it's chemistry and it's physics. And we have our own personal taste, our palates cupping and saying, oh, it's a little better if I do this. It's a little better if I do this. A chef cooking a steak, he's not thinking about like, okay, I'm going to raise the heat a little bit here, lower it a little bit here. There is a perfect way to cook that steak. And green coffee is just another produce, and we're cooking it. And there's a perfect way to cook that green bean. So it's perfectly developed in all the way through. It cracks perfectly. You don't bring out any like roast defects, and it's fully developed. And then it's up to the bean. Yeah, I'm fairly sure there is a universal roast profile that you could use that works for every single coffee. And the heat application is going to be different because some crack harder than others. Like if you have a natural, you're going to remove heat energy before crack to compensate for the more energy released around crack and that kind of thing. But AI should be able to do that for us. They should be able to say, from the attributes of this coffee, I need to remove this much energy at this point to maintain the rate of roast profile that I want to have. And then the coffee should be perfect each time, and we will be obsolete.
That's, maybe we should start like, Veronica, can you open the door? That's interesting. How do you get that to work?
It's on the way, you know.
It's on the way, right?
Yeah, it's gonna
Just
happen.
ask.
Like, look at the Cropster are doing like more and more automation. They're doing crack prediction.
Yeah.
And what's the end goal of that? The end goal is that they're going to have an AI system that's going to roast the coffee for you. That it's learning, you know, from our roast profiles. It's learning. But the problem is still that we have personal tastes, and I might cup a coffee 86 points, and then you might cup it 84. And then what's the AI learning on? Is it learning on my palate or your palate?
Yeah.
So that's the issue. But if we can like decide universally this is quality, then AI will definitely be able to roast the coffee for us to get the optimal.
But maybe you need like a certification of roasters.
Yeah.
Like, do you have the knowledge of roast?
That's what's good about what's it called? Q grading.
Yeah.
Like there are issues with the Q grading system, but an idea to try and align the palates of all different coffee professionals is a good idea. We want to be synchronized. We want to have a universal idea of what quality is. And the more we can decide on that, the better.
Yeah.
But it might also kill a little bit of what's fun about coffee, which has always been like you can do crazy stuff and be out there like, oh, I love this.
Yeah.
And I'm the only person who likes coffee that way, but there must be someone else out there. And it'll kind of kill that fun.
Yeah.
But like
we talked with in the last episode with Josh, the home barista superstar, about the chase. Like that is what is coffee. And for many people, and including me, I think it's the chase. Like they're always, since you can't store coffee and like bring out your perfect bottle, there's always this chase of the next thing and the next brew or the next grinder or whatever. Yeah. And I think that's really nice with coffee as well. Like since you can't store it perfectly, there will always be a next cup. Yeah. And I think that what drives a lot of coffee people, and they're totally fine with that. Yeah. Like, okay, so we need to standardize the roast profile, find a
universal profile.
The universal roast profile. Yeah, I'll say that to Alex, and then we're on it. Maybe we need like 2 of them, one for specialty and one for commercial.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool, Benjamin. I think we should
wrap it up.
Mm-hmm. Once again, you are to be found at Persona.
Yes.
Wednesday to Saturdays. And you are talking wine, brewing 4 cups of coffee. 4
espressos a day. No, but I'm also like available like consulting wise for roasting, coffee, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So if anyone wants help finding the universal roast profile, hit me up.
Yeah, you just come there, you plug the USB in, and you're like done. Like 5,000 euros later.
Yeah,
that's super cool. How's your? Is it like fully booked, or is there still available spaces?
There's still availabilities. I'm not sure how long ahead we're fully booked, but like we always try and make room, like drop in and.
You can also swing by for just a glass, right?
Yeah, just cocktail, like a glass of wine, whatever.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
We're gonna link everything, and you will get the podcast. I think it would be hard to put it up on. No, we can't put it as a co-post at Persona. They are too nerdy about their.
Yeah, we'll see.
So super nice to have you here.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
And I wish for 15 more years in it's 15 years, right?
Yeah, 15 years in Sweden and 15 years in coffee.
That's crazy. And we've been working together like a few years at Drop, a few years at Johnnyström. We had the podcast. What was the name of it? About a cup of coffee or something like that?
Did we do like 1 episode?
3
episodes.
I searched for them, but I think they removed them because none of us is still working there. And we talk about us.
It's like we don't stand for this.
Yeah, so we're in. You're all welcome back, and I hope to see you in a few weeks when we are gonna find the next Swedish champions.
Yeah,
because hopefully both of us are judging.
I hope so.
Nice,
Nice to see you.
Cool.